There is a woman in Chengdu who, every evening at 7 p.m., does 5 small things before the city even finishes its dinner. She puts down her chopsticks while there is still a little room left in her stomach. She pours a small cup of dark, earthy tea and drinks it slowly. She does not touch a glass of ice water, not even in summer. She walks for 20 minutes through the park near her home, past the same lanterns, the same benches, the same old men playing cards. And before she goes to bed, she spends 2 quiet minutes rubbing slow circles around her own stomach. She is 68 years old. Her waistline has barely changed since she was 40. She has never counted a calorie in her life. She does not own a gym membership. And somewhere across the world right now, someone is finishing a 6 a.m. workout, drinking a green smoothie, skipping dinner entirely, doing everything a fitness app has told them to do, and still looking in the mirror at a stomach that refuses to change. What if the difference between these two people has almost nothing to do with how hard they exercise, and almost everything to do with what happens to a single hormone in the 30 minutes after they eat? A hormone that spikes higher and stays higher depending on 5 small choices most people never even think about. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what that hormone is, why it's quietly working against your midsection, and 5 habits, some of them thousands of years old, that come directly from Chinese culture and Chinese medicine, and that Chinese researchers themselves have spent the last decade studying in modern labs. Before we get to the 5 habits, we need to take apart a belief almost everyone holds without ever questioning it. The belief is this: fat loss is a math problem. Burn more than you eat, and the weight disappears. It's the foundation of nearly every diet app, every calorie tracker, every eat less, move more poster on a gym wall. And for an enormous number of people, especially around the belly, it simply doesn't hold up. Not because they aren't trying, because the equation is missing a variable: insulin, the hormone nobody's counting. Insulin isn't the enemy. It's the hormone that ushers sugar out of your bloodstream and into your cells, where it can be used for energy. Every time you eat, insulin rises. That's normal. That's necessary. The problem isn't that insulin rises. The problem is how high it spikes, how fast, and how often it's asked to spike throughout the day. This isn't abstract biology. Chinese researchers studying abdominal weight gain keep pointing to the same pattern. Repeated, sharp blood sugar spikes push the body towards storing fat rather than burning it, and abdominal fat in particular. This is why someone can eat clean, skip dessert, and still carry stubborn weight at the waistline. They're fighting a blood sugar pattern with tools that were never built to touch it. So what does touch it? For centuries, long before anyone owned a glucose monitor, Chinese households built a handful of small habits directly around meals. Habits that, it turns out, blunt exactly this kind of blood sugar spike. Let's go through all 5, in the order they actually happen, because the order matters as much as the habits themselves. Habit 1, the 100-step rule. There's an old Chinese proverb almost everyone in China has heard from a grandparent at least once. Fan hou bai bu zou, huo dao jiu shi jiu. Walk 100 steps after a meal and live to 99. For most of us, dinner ends with the couch. And that, it turns out, might be the single worst timed decision of the day. After a meal, blood sugar begins climbing almost immediately as food is broken down into glucose. Sit down during that window, and the sugar has nowhere to go but into storage. Move gently during that same window, and something different happens. Your contracting leg muscles start pulling glucose out of the bloodstream directly, with barely any help from insulin at all. Here's what surprised researchers comparing the two. A full, structured workout done before a meal and a simple, unhurried walk done after one produced almost identical results for blood sugar control. Same benefit, a fraction of the effort. The old proverb never claimed walking after dinner would outperform a hard workout. It simply claimed it would help. Turns out, it helps just as much. This is why, in cities and villages across China, evenings look the way they do. Sidewalks filling with grandparents, couples, and kids drifting along after dinner. Not for fitness, just because that's simply what you do after you eat. Nobody's chasing a step count. They're just not sitting still. But what you drink during that same window turns out to matter almost as much as the walk itself. And that's habit number 2. Habit 2, the tea most people drink wrong. Green tea gets all the attention in the West. But walk into most Chinese kitchens and you'll find something different steeping. A darker, earthier tea called pu'er, fermented and aged in Yunnan province the way it has been for hundreds of years, along with its close cousin, oolong. Here's what's easy to miss. This isn't just a pleasant ritual. Chinese research institutions have spent years studying pu'er, specifically because of what it does to visceral fat, the deep abdominal fat that wraps around your organs. Laboratory studies on pu'er tea extract have found it lowers body weight, liver fat, and visceral fat accumulation. And more recent work, tracing its effects down to the gut, has found that pu'er reshapes gut bacteria in a way that increases how much energy the body burns rather than stores. The mechanism traces back to a molecule called AMPK, sometimes nicknamed the body's metabolic master switch. Fermented Chinese teas appear to switch it on, nudging fat cells toward burning stored fat rather than accumulating more of it. Human trials on concentrated pu'er extract have shown measurable, if gradual, reductions in body weight and visceral fat over several months. Not a miracle, not instant, but a quiet, compounding nudge, cup after cup, that tilts the body's chemistry in the right direction. The habit isn't complicated. A cup after a meal, brewed dark, unsweetened. No sugar, no cream, nothing to undo the very spike you're trying to soften. And you don't need a trip to China to try it. Pu'er shows up on Amazon, at most Asian grocery stores, and increasingly on the shelf at places like Whole Foods, usually as loose leaf or in small compressed cakes. 2 habits down: move after eating and what fills your cup. But the habit that comes before you even pick up your chopsticks might matter more than either one. Habit 3, the 70% rule. There's a phrase used across Chinese households at the dinner table, often by grandmothers keeping an eye on second helpings. 吃饭七分饱. Eat until you're 70% full. Not stuffed, not even fully satisfied. 70%. Here's the mechanism behind why this isn't just an old saying. The signal that tells your brain, I'm full, doesn't arrive the instant your stomach fills. It takes roughly 15 to 20 minutes to catch up. Eat until you feel completely full, and you've almost certainly already overshot, because the stop sign was still traveling toward your brain while you kept eating. A study specifically on Chinese adults, published in the journal Nutrition and Metabolism, found that eating slowly was closely linked to a healthier fat distribution, lower waist circumference, and less fat carried around the trunk and midsection, especially in adults under 45. The bigger and faster the meal, the sharper the blood sugar spike that follows, and the more insulin is asked to work overtime cleaning it up. The 70% habit isn't a diet. There's no counting involved. It's a single, simple pause. Eating slightly slower and asking, partway through the meal, whether you're satisfied rather than stuffed. Slow down enough, and the stop sign usually arrives right on time. So far, that's movement, tea, and portion awareness. But there's a 4th habit that has nothing to do with what you eat and everything to do with its temperature. Habit 4, Why Grandma never drank ice water. If you've ever eaten at a Chinese restaurant and asked for ice water, you may have noticed the slightly puzzled look. Room temperature or warm water is the default, even in the middle of summer, even alongside a spicy meal that seems to beg for something cold. This isn't a preference. It's a concept that goes back thousands of years in Chinese medicine, built around something called qi, usually translated as the spleen. In this system, the spleen governs digestion the way a stove governs cooking, generating what practitioners describe as digestive fire, the warmth needed to break food down and turn it into usable energy. Cold food and ice drinks, the theory goes, act like pouring cold water directly onto that fire, forcing the body to spend energy just rewarming itself before digestion can properly continue. When that digestive fire runs weak over and over, ancient Chinese medical texts describe the result as a condition called dampness, a kind of sluggish, waterlogged internal state linked to bloating, fatigue, and stubborn weight that clusters, once again, around the middle. Modern TCM clinics still treat this exact pattern today, and its central piece of advice hasn't changed in centuries. Warm cooked foods and warm drinks in, cold foods and ice drinks out. The habit is almost embarrassingly simple to adopt. Warm or room temperature water with meals, not iced. A cup of hot water sipped slowly instead of a cold one gulped down. Nothing to buy, nothing to track. Just a different tap. That covers what and how you drink. The fifth and final habit is the one almost nobody outside of China has heard of at all. And Chinese researchers now think it may work on the gut in a way that's almost identical to certain weight loss medications. Habit 5. The 2-minute belly rub. In traditional Chinese medicine, there's a practice called mo fu, quite literally, rubbing the abdomen. For centuries, it's been a small ritual before bed. Flat palm, gentle pressure, slow clockwise circles around the navel, following the same direction food naturally moves through the intestines, along what practitioners call the Ren meridian, a line believed to run down the center of the body, regulating digestion and energy flow. For a long time, this looked like folklore. Then researchers at Tianjin University of Traditional Chinese Medicine started testing it directly. Their study found that abdominal massage reduced food intake and body weight in obese lab models by activating gut receptors that trigger the release of two appetite-regulating hormones, PYY and GLP-1. If GLP-1 sounds familiar, it's the same hormone that modern weight loss injections are built to mimic. The massage didn't inject anything. It simply nudged the gut into releasing more of what it already makes on its own. Separate Chinese research on the same technique has linked it to improved digestion and gut motility, describing it as stimulating the body's second brain, the dense network of nerves lining the intestines that talks constantly with appetite and metabolism. The habit takes less time than brushing your teeth. 2 minutes. Flat palm, gentle clockwise circles around the navel, ideally before bed on an emptying stomach. Nothing to buy, nothing to master. 5 habits, 1 evening. Let's bring it all together, because the order matters as much as the habits themselves. Walk after you eat. Don't sit. Drink dark tea instead of sugary or iced drinks. Stop at 70% full, not stuffed. Keep your water warm, not cold. And spend 2 quiet minutes rubbing slow circles around your stomach before bed. None of this requires a gym membership. None of it requires a meal plan, a supplement, or a single dollar spent. What it requires is something smaller and, in its own way, harder. Rethinking the small decisions that surround every single meal. Because that stubborn weight around your middle, was never really just about willpower. It was about blood sugar. And blood sugar, more than almost anything else in the body, responds to habit. That's it. 5 small shifts in one order, rooted in Chinese kitchens for generations, repeated daily. The woman in Chengdu with her small cup of tea has never once called any of this a routine. To her, it's simply how an evening ends. If this changed the way you think about your own evenings, share it with someone who's been doing everything right and still can't figure out why nothing's changing. They may be one quiet dinner away from finding out why. This has been a look into the science and tradition behind Chinese eating habits and metabolic health. Not a prescription, a perspective. If this hit you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And drop a comment letting us know which habit you're starting with tonight. We'll see you in the next one.